Hey, what is up guys, Murgaman4 here, and today I'll be reviewing an episode of Doctor Who that is not quite all that it seems. Dot and Bubble introduces us to the world of Find Time, a place where everyone lives within their own personal social media bubbles pretty much 24/7. It's an interesting concept, and the idea of everyone being too caught up in their own bubble to realize the real world problems around them, taking the form of man-eating slugs here, has a lot of potential, and visually, I think it's executed very well. Unfortunately, I'm not so much a fan of the content. I think a big part of the issue for me is that this is a Doctor and Companion light story, with the Doctor and Ruby trapped outside and unable to help the Find Time residents directly. I quite like that idea in theory, but in practice we're left following a lead character that's annoying, unlikable, and frankly, just not fun to watch. And I know that this is intentional, but there's absolutely ways to make characters that you'd never want to meet in real life still be a joy to watch on screen, and in my opinion, Dot and Bubble utterly fails in that regard. The result is a setting and characters that I'm just not interested in being around for any length of time, and it's the first time in a while that I've found myself glancing at the clock, wondering how much was left. And this episode is on the shorter side. Now, being entirely fair, let's talk about some positives. I love the slugs. They're such a fantastic design, and the idea of people's dots leading the unquestioning residents directly to their doom is great. While I didn't care much for Find Time itself, I was rather invested in where the mystery was building up to, especially with how much the story was pushing the idea that specific residents were being targeted over others. Unfortunately, I was left extremely disappointed by the answers. While it makes perfect sense that the AI would turn against the humans, the whole killing in alphabetical order thing is baffling to me. We're given zero explanation as to why they're killing people like that. It just seems to exist to give us the, admittedly brilliant, moment of betrayal from Lindy, and especially given how big a deal the story made of the question, the fact that the answer is so pointless just feels incredibly sloppy to me. Likewise, the whole thing with the slugs. That makes sense, it works, until it's revealed that the dots could just kill their owners themselves. So then, what's the point of them? If the AI hated the humans so much, why go to this overly elaborate plan that gives plenty of time to escape than just kill everyone all at once when they activate their dot for the day? I don't know, it just feels like the story was a lot more interested in getting to the ending than it was telling a cohesive whole, which, good though the ending is, just makes me feel like I've wasted the 40 minutes or so it took to get there. Okay, sorry for that little tangent, let's go back to positives. I was quite pleasantly surprised by Ricky September. I had no idea he'd have a bigger role in the story than E-celebrity dancing to songs, but when he showed up in person, it was actually a huge breath of fresh air. He's the only likable guest character in the whole episode, and it's interesting that he takes up the role that the Doctor would normally have, and unlike Lindy, is actually open-minded about receiving help from the outside. Admittedly, I did find it a bit convenient that one of the residents of Find Time was already on the case, and I think it does diminish the impact of the Doctor and Ruby attempting to save a society that can't save itself, but as far as this episode goes, it's a relatively minor criticism. And I guess now's as good a time as any to bring up Susan Twist, who the show has finally explicitly acknowledged. I've avoided mentioning her in any of my reviews so far, but for anyone who's unaware, Susan Twist has had an appearance in every single episode of Ncuti Gatwa's era so far. But I have to admit, I thought the acknowledgement here was pretty clunky, with the Doctor straight up saying, yeah, we saw her in Boom. I kind of wish both the Doctor and Ruby had had a slightly subtler reaction, kind of like Ruby had in the last episode, especially when this episode refuses to expand on it anyways. I gotta be honest, I'm just not a fan of how Russell is handling the arcs this time around, which is a massive disappointment because I thought his arcs in his first era were among the best the show's ever had. These ones just feel, I don't know, a little too self-aware, I guess? Oh well, we'll just have to see where the finale takes it. Alright, let's talk about the episode's climax. I think it's pretty clear that I did not enjoy the majority of this episode. But practically from the moment Lindy betrays Ricky up until the credits, the episode shifts into a new gear that's actually exciting and interesting and unpredictable. I love Lindy not just leaving Ricky to die, but actively causing his death. It's completely the opposite of what you'd expect from Doctor Who. Even when a character starts out unlikable like Lindy, if they're in the lead role, we expect them to grow and change, but Lindy actually gets worse. And then, she finally meets up with the Doctor and Ruby in person, alongside some of the other residents, and we get such an incredibly harrowing ending, with the Find Timers refusing the Doctor's help simply because he's not white. Ncuti Gatwa gives a powerhouse of a performance here, and it's interesting reflecting on the rest of the episode and picking up on all the hints and microaggressions before the racism is revealed in full. It's a refreshing change to have the Doctor really properly lose, and not just to the more literal monster, but because the people he's trying to help refuse to be saved. Now, I do have to admit, powerful though this ending is, I do still have a couple issues with it. Firstly, and this is admittedly a nitpick, by the time Lindy arrives, we see tons of colonists down there preparing to leave. But we're expected to believe that the Doctor hasn't talked or interacted with any of them before Lindy arrives? It just seems weird for them to be as racist as they so clearly are, but to take so long to explicitly express it. Also, I can't help but feel the ending is kind of wasted by being the conclusion to a much weaker episode. The gap in quality between the first 40-ish minutes and the last 5 is massive. I also can't help but feel there's a bit of irony in that the episode makes a point of the entire Findtime colony being white people, but what about Doctor Who's lead creative team? The producers, the writers, the directors, they're all white this season. This is already something I was disappointed to see with the first Black Doctor's debut, but I don't know. I know RTD's heart is in the right place, but something doesn't sit right with me about a white writer delivering this message in amongst a very white creative team. It's not so much a fault with the episode itself, but I guess it just makes the lack of any writers of color this season that much more apparent. So, yeah, I really can't say I had a great time with this episode. Honestly, I was kind of baffled when I went online and saw basically nothing but praise, tons of people calling it their favorite of the season. I mean, I'm glad that they enjoyed it, but this episode was not for me. Ultimately, I'll be giving it a 6.5 out of 10. Frankly, those last 5 minutes are doing a lot of the heavy lifting. And while I can see myself rewatching the final scene plenty of times over, I just have no interest in retaking the journey it took to get there. Still, next time we have our first proper guest writers in over 4 years, and it's a historical story, which I'm always up for. So with that, please let me know what you thought of Dot and Bubble down in the comments below, and I'll see you all next week with my review of Rogue.